Good morning everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's my absolute honor to welcome a very distinguished panel with us here today to discuss global challenges and whether nuclear energy can really rise to meeting those global challenges. Let's start by defining what those are. Obviously mitigating climate change, but also the need to meet rising global energy demand, to build resilience to locked-in climate impacts that many countries around the world are already experiencing today, including water scarcity, food stress, and habitats protection. But that's not the only crisis that we're dealing with. Of course, we also have the energy crisis and indeed the global economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. So the first task for the nuclear industry in light of these big challenges must be firstly, I guess, to sustain, to maintain and expand clean nuclear energy towards making its contribution towards economic recovery from the pandemic with clean, reliable energy. So to discuss these issues with us this morning, may I introduce our panel. We have Mr. Likachev, Director General from ROSATOM, Mr. Gariba from the European Commission, Mr. Jacques from the French Atomic Energy Commission, and Mr. Al-Hamadi from the Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation. And we're very honored also to have Mr. DG Grossi joining us remotely via video. So the New York Times stated that nuclear energy went mainstream at COP26 this year. And Mr. Likachev, I know that you were at COP26 this year, and I'd be very interested to hear your reflections on the presentation of nuclear energy, the representation of nuclear energy, and really what your views on whether you think that nuclear has gone mainstream in the climate discourse.
Thank you very much for this question. I would like to ask my colleagues to put on their headphones. First of all, Kirsty, I would like to congratulate you on getting the main award of the World Nuclear Exhibition. I know that you won as a result of a very tight competition, and the vote that helped you win was ours, actually. So I would like to congratulate you. Did you get the interpretation? I'm speaking to the interpreters. Can you get the headphones? Which? It's on the second channel. The English interpretation is on the second channel. So yes, once again, I would like to congratulate you. On winning the award, the WNE award. You won by one vote, and this vote was ours. Okay, going back to your question. I would like to ask just a few minutes to go back to recall this important event, COP26. It was preceded by a few very important key events. The fact that Mr. Grossi shaped the Vienna Group, the so-called Vienna Group. This was the first time that over a dozen industry players got together. We are competitors, obviously, we are rivals, but we have one common goal, and this goal is to make nuclear energy the key component of the green transition. Another key event is the letter of the 10. Actually, it was 10 originally, but then it was more than 10, and it included the letter was also signed by France. And this letter was a statement where nuclear power, where the signatories asked to make the nuclear energy considered to be a green source of energy. And another thing is that Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation, asked to increase the share of the nuclear power in Russia from 20% to 25% in the energy mix. And I would say that this conference, COP26, became a pivotal event, which we can call not just a pivotal but a revolutionary event. it changed the paradigm. It was a paradigm shift. We were used to just talk about acceptability of nuclear energy. Acceptability was the key word, the buzzword. And now we have moved on to admit, to accept that it is necessary, that we have to have it in the energy mix, in the global energy mix. Of course, the need for nuclear power is different in different countries. And here I could cite France as an example, where the share of nuclear power in the energy mix is over 70%. This is a leader in that in terms of nuclear power. The needs are varied, but most participants of COP26 consider nuclear energy as an integral part of the transition and of decarbonization. And you don't need to be a genius to understand that with such growing demand, the demand for nuclear power is going to grow as well. As for the challenges and whether nuclear energy can rise to take them on, we have statistics, and the statistics are independent. The statistics is independent of your political approaches or anything like that. The Analytical Institute of the European Commission, the experts from the Russian Federation, French experts, experts of the UN, all agree that the joint emissions in the over the life cycle of a nuclear power plant are either on par with wind power units or even lower than that. So you can take this information in a different way, but it is a fact. As far as I know, in the EU, 26% of electricity is generated by nuclear power plants. So you can't neglect such a huge share. It is significant, it is essential. And I would like to underline that this number, this figure, is based on European technologies, on technologies developed in Europe, in France, in the UK, in Germany, in Russia as well. So this is European legacy. This is European heritage. On top of that, 80% of the natural gas is important. So the question is, what should Europe do? Develop importing energy sources or develop their technologies? And I think the answer is obvious, because this is a huge the demand for energy is also a huge impulse to develop technologies, to create a new dynasty of educated people, of educated professionals. So this is how I could briefly explain the results of COP26. And I would like to thank our partners from France, because our leaders, our presidents set the tone, such an offensive, in a good way, tone, very fact-based and evidence-based, to promote nuclear energy on the global in the global dialogue.
Looking forward to hearing Mr. Gariba's response. What should Europe do to that question? But before we do, DG Grossi was not able to join us today, but he has recorded a video message for us. So, ladies and gentlemen, please pay attention for a couple of moments to the screen. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be with you, and I thank my good friend Alexei Gliachev for his kind invitation. Always, when Rosatom organizes an activity like this, I take great pleasure in participating with you as a good and trusted partner. Will nuclear take on the global challenges? This is the question of today's event. It is a question a lot of people are asking, and more, I think, we are coming to the answer that yes, it will. It helps to remember that nuclear has already been a big part of avoiding the emissions that cause climate change. Without it, we would be in a much worse place today. 442 nuclear power plants across the world are still providing more than 1/4 of all our low-carbon energy. That is no small number. Many of those nuclear power plants are at a point where decisions need to be made over whether to extend their life or not. Operators and regulators will need to think very hard about that. They will need to look at the data and make evidence-based decisions. And they will need to communicate what is at stake to their politicians and to the citizens. The IAEA is here to help countries manage this in a variety of ways. It is one cost-effective option to buy the time we need to bring more low-carbon energy solutions to the market, including those still in development. The International Energy Agency has made clear that nuclear will need to be a part of the solution, and so will technologies that have not yet been invented. But at the same time, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports warns clearly that we do not have much time. So, extending the life of existing nuclear power plants is a breach worth considering carefully. The IEA's high case projections see a doubling of nuclear capacity over the coming 30 years. Everyone here knows very well that it's one thing to calculate such projections on paper, but quite another to make them happen. It won't only be up to the industry. Policymakers will need to make important decisions. The EU taxonomy is one example. Also, society will need to accept nuclear as a safe, secure, affordable, and reliable option. Because the IAEA is a trusted, impartial, science-based global organization, we play an important role in demystifying nuclear. That is why it is absolutely critical that the agency is supported and that its credibility is guarded like a precious jewel. At COP26, I experienced our role in the debate in a very real way. So many people I spoke to said, nuclear, yes, but what about this or that? They want to be able to make an informed decision. They want a solution, and even those who have opposed nuclear in the past are open to consider it now. Meanwhile, many of the clear-eyed younger people I meet so anxious about climate change are inspiringly enthusiastic about nuclear. We should not let them down. As nuclear acceptance is growing, the industry needs to be ready to do its part as well. That means being smart about standardization. For example, when it comes to small and modular reactors, we must all work hard to ensure a strong, independent regulator. But at the same time, industry and regulators should be constructive and recognize that their long-term goals are the same. No one benefits when things go wrong. Collaborating across borders and helping each other fulfill nuclear promise is key. Safety and security must come first, no doubt about it. And that is where the IAEA is at the fulcrum. No one can do it alone. It takes safety standards, guidance and good practice, legal frameworks, peer reviews, expert advice, publications, knowledge sharing, and joint emergency preparedness. And for all that, the IEA is the place. It is indispensable. So, back to your question. Will nuclear take on the global challenges? Yes. Yes, it will. And we will do our part.
Fantastic. Well, yes. I agree. Thank you. So, Mr. Gariba, I'd like to turn to you now. Will nuclear rise to the challenges? So, what challenges in Europe are we facing in light of, honestly, our failure so far to bend the emissions curve, in light of rising energy prices, in light of the energy crisis, in light of the need for economic recovery? We're seeing public opinion, public support for nuclear energy rising in countries that even traditionally may have rejected nuclear, Ireland, Germany. And in response, political leaders are looking again and restating their commitment to nuclear energy, which they see as being vital to transition from coal, to achieve their net zero targets. So the landscape is changing, the climate is changing for nuclear in Europe. I would love to hear your perspective on this.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for Rosatom to organizing this panel. Well, you all know that Europe is a completely integrated environmental energy policy that brings us to full decarbonization to 2050. And there are a number of measures that span all sorts of society that are in this package. It's not only energy, it has to go to transport, it has to go to agriculture, it has to go in all parts of our life. Of course, energy is key because it's the biggest emitter. 80% of our emissions come from energy production or use, so that's very clear. In the EU, we have a feature which is that our member states, they decide on their energy mix. And so when it comes to the EU level, we have to set conditions to those who want to use nuclear energy. And I will go very much back to the words of DG Grossi by saying that the strictest standards of safety, the best management of waste, by the way, which is a big element of acceptance for the people, and the strictest security measures are the precondition for the continued use of nuclear energy. Now, as you say, our member states look into this with lots of interest. We have plans for energy use until 2030 and beyond, and 10 of our member states have clearly said that they want to use or expand the use of nuclear energy. There are others that want to close down, like Germany, that you mentioned, like Belgium, like Spain, but we have plans in Poland, and I think I counted yesterday evening something like up to 26 new nuclear reactors that are talked about. Of course, you know, you need, indeed, these are like the plans that DG Grossi mentioned. You need to be careful with the plans to see whether there is a real come up. What is true is also that the climate has changed very much in terms of new technologies and the expectations that small modular reactors can fill a number of gaps. For example, not only in the electricity production, this is mainly for the replacement of medium-sized coal power plants in certain parts of Europe, but there are also other industrial uses which are expected, like heating, district heating, or another important part of the transition, which is the production of hydrogen. So we will need to see whether all this comes together and so on. But as DG Ligachev has said very rightly, at the moment 26% of the electricity production in the EU is coming from nuclear. And this is a base that allows also to expand the other energy, low carbon energy sources, and I mean the renewables, because I think that when you set a very ambitious target like the 2050 one, you need a collaborative approach throughout the energy system in order to achieve the target. So it's not a question of competition, it's a question of putting together all the tools that you have in order to achieve your goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. Only 20% of our energy use is actually electricity, and the challenge of decarbonizing the other 80% is very significant. And of course, the role of nuclear could be extremely valuable there for hydrogen production and heat and so on, as you say. So thank you. I'd like to turn to Mr. Jacques now. You know, France is in many ways what success looks like from a climate perspective. You already have a very, very clean electricity system. Tell us about how France will maintain, sustain, expand its climate leadership.
Good morning to everyone. Thanks for having me, and I'm pleased and honored to be on such a distinguished panel. So, as regards the French situation, maybe I can first say that I largely concur with all what was said by DG Ligachev, DG Grossi, and also Massimo in terms of setting the general landscape. Maybe first, starting with the COVID crisis. When you see that during the crisis, when we were installed, we had only a reduction of, let's say, between 15 and 18% of greenhouse gas emission, and we found that almost unbearable because we weren't able to travel and so on. We realized the challenge. Then I think we must also put that in perspective because we are, and you rightly pointed out that French electricity is 70% nuclear, but French electricity, that's only, let's say, 20% of, as you mentioned, of the global energy consumption. So it means that we are still relying on 60% of fossil fuels, and that's a challenge. And I think it means that we have to speak about nuclear energy, not necessarily about power generation only. That is, and I will come back on 2 points, and that was stressed by a recent report in France from the transmission system operator, so RTE, the grid operator, and basically the thick report produced by RTE, if I can summarize it, there are 2 main conclusions. The first main conclusion is certainly that we will need electrification to address the challenges of climate change. That's the first point. So electricity consumption will grow. The second challenge mentioned in this report is we can't have a single solution. Do you want that I translate that in English, maybe? Anyway. So, I can also provide the English translation of the French version. So you have to be cautious with coronavirus. So I'll try to carry on. So now that's the first. I will make it even shorter after. I promise.
We hope you enjoyed WNE 2021.
So I think I can carry on. So my second point was to say that there is no single solution. We need absolutely nuclear power, but we also need to rethink the energy system so that we've got this convergence between the various forms of energy, renewable, nuclear, and so on. And it brings me to my next point, that is, for the time being, we are using nuclear energy for producing electricity. In the coming years, I think we will need nuclear energy for much more various uses. That is, for instance, if you think of heat production, district heating, as mentioned by Massimo, also production of hydrogen and so on, it means that we will have to think in terms of enlarging the kind of solution we have in nuclear activity, enlarging the spectrum of technology. It also means that we will have to innovate in the field of nuclear. So my plea would be that not only is nuclear a solution for electricity production, and as said, electrification is key to decarbonization, but also that we have to reflect on other kind of usage we may have of nuclear energy. So to answer your question, I think the answer, as DG Grossi said, not only is nuclear part of the solution, but we have to take the best possible use of nuclear energy, and it means diversifying the kind of use we have. And it's also an important message for, I think, for young people, because it means that it's not an old energy. It's not only a matter of carrying on with the same old schemes and the same old production and so on. We have to do that, of course, but there is a huge scope, a huge field for innovation, for transformation, and for developing new solutions using nuclear. And I think that's a message, an important message. And in the current context where the mood music about nuclear is changing, obviously, as DG Likachev stressed, I think that's also something we have to stress, and it will bring many, many young people to work with us on nuclear issues.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Mr. Al-Hamadi, congratulations on your shining example of, really the most successful establishment of a new build program in country in recent memory, really extraordinary. So UAE has now established incredible leadership in the region on building clean energy very successfully, and has now set a very challenging target of 50% clean energy, a combination of nuclear and renewables, by 2050. Would you like to tell us why nuclear is so important in meeting those targets?
Thank you, Kirsten. And first of all, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased and honored to be here with you today and be with a distinguished panelist. If I may take you to 2007 and give you just what was our rationale in building nuclear power plants for an oil and gas country. And we did a very comprehensive study, and we evaluated the sources of energy, and being completely not looking at the name of technology or the source of heat or the source of electricity. We looked at renewable, we looked at nuclear, we have also oil and gas. And when you look at it from without naming it, just looking at the thermal source and the economics of it and the security of supply of it, the nuclear came out as similar for us like hydropower plants. They are stable, they are 24/7, they provide abundance of electricity. So in the UAE, we don't have much of rain, we don't have rivers, so we have to discount hydro. So then we looked at nuclear as a source of a clean, reliable, baseload electricity that runs for 24/7. And that's where we started evaluating it in a further and more detail. So that was 2007. So fast forward to today, we managed to start up the first unit. So Baraka, the first power plant, is commercially operational. And the second unit, it is in 50% power today in the power extension testing. And that was done in a very systematic. Mr. Lechiev, you mentioned we need to look at science, look at the data, and look at the economics of the energy sources. And nuclear checks all the boxes when it comes to security of supply, safety, and also availability of electricity. Now, if we evaluate the decision today, will we do the same what we did in 2007? I would say 100% yes. because now we discovered, or the world discovered, that from the last over a decade, electricity demand went up, and that's very visible. Everybody in this room holds a phone, and your phone took maybe 7 hours to charge. There's a lot of energy in your pocket here and your phones. That consumes a lot of electricity. Those phones work on a cloud, and the cloud computing needs a lot of electricity. You add to that then the transportation, heating, cooling, and you name it. So our trend of electrification and energy consumption per capita, per human, is growing dramatically. Our climate footprint or climate change effect, if we don't do anything, it's going to be definitely very, very negative, and everybody in this room agrees on that. So in the UAE today, we managed in the last 10 years to install 70% of renewable energy in the region, in the UAE, in the region of our region. We managed to start up the first reactor, and the second reactor is about starting soon. So by 2025, we will reduce our electricity carbons by 50% in Abu Dhabi. 50% will be reduced from carbon emissions. And that's a major change. Adding to that also the renewable energy, it's also a small addition, but it makes an impact. So I'm very confident that we've made the right choice when it comes to energy mix of a diversified portfolio between gas and oil and gas, renewable, and nuclear. And if I may add one last point here, what we did also in the last 6 months, we've initiated our first auction to buy the green certificates. So we have nuclear, by the way, as part of that, for the first time, I think, in the world, to auction clean energy from nuclear. And to my surprise, our oil and gas company came and bought 90% of the certificates. The aluminum factory also looking to buy that certificates. The steel factory, they want. So the demand, not just from the industry, the generator of power, but from the industry, they want to be part of that solution to save the environment and provide a cleaner products through cleaner energy. And I'm very happy to be here with you today, and at the same time see the positive trend toward nuclear energy. Mr. Lakshayev mentioned that today, COP26, there is a lot of positive trend about nuclear and acceptance of nuclear technology. And I'd also like to welcome you in Abu Dhabi in COP28. We will showcase our lessons learned on the renewable, nuclear, and also the oil and gas industries, how we manage to achieve the journey toward the 2050, as Christy mentioned.
Fantastic. Wow. I'm sort of in danger of starting to feel optimistic. The future feels kind of bright. And, you know, Fatih Birol said in his speech yesterday, he said, you know, nuclear is making a comeback, but he said, make sure you stay back. So what do we need to do to actually maintain, sustain, expand, and really deliver against these challenges? So what are our big challenges related to cost, related to the rates of deployment that we need to be delivering against very urgent climate timescales at the scale of the challenge that's needed to close the fuel cycle? Mr. Likachev, may I turn to you?
Well, in order to answer your question about the tomorrow of the nuclear energy and about how environmentally friendly it can be, I think first we need to take into consideration two aspects. First one is that the nuclear energy indeed is the youngest energy system on the planet. The first nuclear power plant, for example, a power plant in Obninsk, that was built back in the USSR. And this power plant hasn't yet reached its 70th anniversary. As to other sources of energy, like renewables, solar energy, wind energy, and fossil fuels, all those have been used by the humanity for ages. Of course, we haven't solved all the challenges of the nuclear energy. Well, of course, here it's very difficult for me to stay objective. Of course, I am subjective, and I come from the dynasty of nuclear experts, so I inherited this subjectiveness, if I may put it that way. But I'll nevertheless will try to take an objective position, and I would like to set out three distinctive features of nuclear energy. First of all, we are openly announcing our plans, and we are announcing our scientific research and development work that helps the nuclear energy to move on, to develop, and to improve its safety. We work on safety, we improve our partnerships with scientific organizations, we work on public accessibility, and I think that all that is very important for us. Aspect number two, nuclear energy is scientifically based. We have a solid scientific base, not only in terms of our R&D programs. We have extensive partnerships, and we are going to sign yet another document today. Today we are going to sign a three-party agreement, a memorandum between the French Nuclear Energy Agency, EDF, and ROSATOM, about the partnership in terms of closing the nuclear fuel cycle. And I think it's a breakthrough. This is the industrial confirmation and the proof of the possibility of this technology. And then we are going to demonstrate that this technology can work through numerous cycles. So we do not only prove that we can do that, we are going to prove that it can be recycled on and on. It is very important indeed. You know, when scientists that come from independent institutions are convinced that this is technologically possible, that the industry can implement this technology, it is important. And number three, and here I agree with Mr. Grossi, indeed, the discussion around the nuclear energy has moved to a new level. It has reached an international level, and we see that France, the UK, the United States, Russia, of course we are the makers in terms of this field. The countries that there are also countries who joined the club of nuclear powers. There are countries that are going to do that, and indeed we are welcoming all these moves in terms of IAEA, the International Nuclear Association, OECD. Indeed, we are holding a lot of conferences in order to show the possible routes of development to the whole international community. We are showing how we can develop the nuclear energy in order to reach the fourth generation of our technology. The fourth generation technology means wasteless handling of uranium. It means recycling uranium and producing zero waste. So we are going to have a net zero nuclear exchange with the environment. We are extracting certain nuclear resources and we are bringing them back. And of course that will significantly influence and change economic processes, value chains and supply chains. The nuclear energy is planning to prolong the life cycles of nuclear power plants up to 60 years, but we are also considering projects that will be able to last for 100 years.
Well, that is very exciting. Really, you know, beginning to look at recycling fuel. That's a tremendous development. Congratulations! I'm really delighted to hear that. I'd like to now turn to our panel and ask each of you to provide us with some comments about innovation. Innovation is obviously a very important driver. How do we accelerate innovation in the sector to achieve these goals around cost and speed and scale that are needed in the context of our climate and energy challenges? So, Mr. Jacques, if I could invite you to begin. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Let me first say I largely share all what was said by DG Likachev in terms of putting things in perspective. So we clearly have to secure our current assets. Then, if I may come back to what I said earlier, when we think that we will use nuclear energy more in the coming years and for more, many more kind of needs, I think it shows the road for innovation. It means, for instance, that we not only need large power plant, but also small power plant, and it means that small modular reactors or even advanced modular reactors are in order. And not only, again, to produce electricity, but also to produce heat, and we may have a huge range of such small modular or advanced modular reactor. That's my first point. The second point is, as DG Likachev points out, nuclear energy is a young energy, but at the same time, it's something of a long-term perspective. We have to design, or we have to decipher this long-term perspective. It means that we have current immediate needs to secure the decarbonization in 2050. And it's just why we need the current reactors. We need reactors that will be ready in, let's say, 2030 or 2035. And we have to think further. And I guess in terms of thinking further, we can be much more innovative in terms of the kind of fuel cycle we may imagine. Also, that's my fate. That's my fate, you know.
Sorry.
Just I'm so keen on safety measures about COVID that it's reminded every time. So I'll try. Can you hear me even? Yeah. So I carry on, not to lose time. So I think we have to think further in terms of innovation. It means, as I said, fuel cycle. It also means what we can do in terms of innovation for. In terms of coolant, for instance, in the reactors. Also innovation in terms of fuels, because we can have fuels much more accident tolerant and so on. So again, it shows what we can aim at in, let's say, 2050 or 2060. And it's clear that at some point, if we want some sustainable form of nuclear energy, we will need to move from the current form we have in terms of reactors to something which was much more better use all the content of energy included in the nuclear materials, and that's just why we will have to move to a next generation. But again, we need a scheme to set that with milestones in the coming, let's say, 20, 30, 60, or even more coming years.
Thank you. Mr. Gariba.
Thank you very much. Well, you know, there is, when you look at innovation, I think there is both hardware and software. So the hardware is the money that you give. And in Europe, you know, it's mixed. You have money that comes from the Commission, and there is money that comes from the member states. So the money that comes from the Commission is dedicated to what I said before, is dedicated to safety, is dedicated to waste management, accident-tolerant fuel, and things like also Francois mentioned. If I stay on the hardware, there is a very big piece of hardware that we finance, and that we work together also with our Russian colleagues, which is ITER. It is, I'm not shy to say that this is the biggest project financed by the European Union, and it is a very interesting endeavor, because it tries to fulfill all these criteria of future and sustainability that you also mentioned. Very little waste. A technology which is much less accident prone, the effects of which accidents are minimal as compared to, let me say, more traditional fission reactors. So, and what is very interesting is that, you know, people think, but this is a technology of the future. Well, not really. I mean, there is lots of engineering and conventional know-how that has to be put in the construction of a nuclear tokamak like ITER is. It's not anymore a experimental machine for physicists only. This is a nuclear device. So I think that there are unexploited synergies that have to be looked into that. Then I come to the software, and the software is the fact that we need to create also an environment where innovation can take place. And I'm thinking specifically at small and modular reactors here. Because when I look at the European situation, where we have a large variety of safety authority, regulatory authorities, we need to ensure that the licensing of these objects is done, let me say, in sync with the needs of the market and of society that needs to use these machines. So we need to find models whereby we don't need to relicense X many times the same models, because if we do that, we will immediately kill the serious effect that these machines can actually have. So I think that this, what I call the software dimension, which is the human factor, if you like, and the way that people have to collaborate, is a very important part of the overall process of innovation that we need to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Al-Hamadi, if I could invite you just to make some brief remarks. We're quite low on time. Apologies.
Appreciate it. So from my side, I would say what about innovation. So as my colleague mentioned, one of them is on the digital transformation today. We are on the digital age, and there's a lot of ways of, when it comes to training, it comes to the safety, evaluation of the systems of the power plants. SMR was also talked about, and I would like to take caveat, a specific subject there. How do we make nuclear complement the other sources of energy in a very stable and reliable grid? Electricity grid is designed in a way that designed 40, 50 years ago, and designed in a very simple process, a very simple system. And with the current advanced technologies, we need to find innovative ways how we can generate different sources of energy, cleaner sources of energy, and make them resilient and sustainable with a grid that is running 24/7 and safe and secure, reliable manner. And that's what will take a lot of effort and time to be able to do that.
That's wonderful, wonderful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to join me in congratulating and thanking our very distinguished panel for their leadership in this sector.